boards and committees. So I don't know if we all bring our meeting to order. So I bring the select board meeting to order tonight. Walter, to you.
I will bring the Advisory Finance Committee meeting to order.
And I bring the school committee's meeting to order as well.
Oh, thank you. And as a reminder, this is being recorded by Westborough TV. And we are
Yes, it's hybrid.
Hard copies up against the wall there.
Oh, yeah, we have to read the...
the thing. Yes.
Not it.
Here, I got it. Yeah. To me, you got a hard key to the best. Thank you very much. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. This means that members of the public body as well as members of the public may access this meeting in person or via virtual means. In-person attendance will be at the Great Hall, second floor of 45 West Main Street, and it is possible that all members of the public body may attend remotely with in-person attendance consisting of members of the public. This meeting may also be accessed remotely and there's a link posted on the website with an ID and passcode. When required by law or allowed by the chair, persons wishing to provide public comment or otherwise participate in the meeting may do so by in-person attendance or by accessing the meeting remotely as noted above. Additionally, the meeting will be broadcast live in real time via Verizon Channel 28 and Charter Channel 192 or via Westborough TV's online platform at westboroughTV.org and their YouTube channel. And this is being live streamed and recorded by Westborough TV. Thank you. With that, I'll hand it to the town manager.
Thank you. So this is the first step in our FY25 budget process. For folks who haven't attended before, it's an opportunity. We've done it for the last few years. It's an opportunity to talk about upcoming budget pressures. We're not forecasting any numbers at this point for FY25, but we are just identifying some things that we expect to see or we expect to bring to you related to the FY25 budget so that everyone can be on the same page as we go into that process. We'll start with the FY23 closeout. That FY23 closed out at the end of June, so June 30th of 2023. You can see here that when we compare to FY22, we had an increase in free cash. We also had a 2.88% increase in our operating budget and a 7% increase in our average single-family tax bill. Here we are using the free cash comparison. So this is free cash that was certified for use in fiscal 23, and that's how we compare to other communities in our dashboard towns. And this is the comparison of other communities in our dashboard towns related to our average single-family tax bill and our excess levy capacity. So that's the closeout of fiscal 23. And looking at fiscal 24, of course, we put that budget together in December. We put numbers in that budget in terms of what our estimates are going to be. Lots of things happen, including the signing of the state budget, and then we go to annual town meeting with updated estimates. This is an opportunity to give you further updated estimates based on things that we know now, and then we'll again bring updated estimates again at the October town meeting, and then obviously the tax rate will be set in November. In terms of our fiscal 24 budget document, just wanting to point out that for the fourth year in a row, we have won the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award through GFOA. So there's a variety of criteria. There are 3 reviewers that have to go through our budget document. They are very detailed in their review and point out many things. And we're very proud of this award. In looking at our values, this is an update of our values. So we're at $3.7 billion for residential values, and then 1.56 billion for commercial, industrial, personal property. Here we're showing our estimate for the FY24 tax bill. So at the annual town meeting, when the budget was voted on, we were estimating an increase of $765 based on things that have been finalized, including the state budget and other things. Right now we're estimating $635, and it's important to note that that's reflective of if all of the articles at the October town meeting are approved. So the budget adjustments that are, excuse me, that are presented for the October town meeting are inclusive in that 635. We look at the total town reserves. We're estimating 12%. We're estimating our growth in free cash. So again, looking here, this is similar to what we saw last year at this time, which is that we try to keep free cash between 5 and 7% of our general fund, and we're estimating to be at 12. Understanding that we use most of our free cash at the annual town meeting for our capital plan. We also have free cash articles on the October town meeting warrant. Last year, we increased our stabilization account with free cash. We put $1.8 million into our stabilization fund. That was to get us close to that 5%, though of course as budget numbers change, that percentage moves. So we are very close to that 5% with stabilization, using our estimates for FY24. This is a draft of what we would see in the Finance Committee handbook, but this is showing where we're at related to our free cash and stabilization. So the total of free cash and stabilization in our comprehensive fiscal management policies, our goal is to be between 10 and 15%, and we're estimating to be at 16.35%. Some of the things that contribute to our free cash number, there's an article on town meeting warrant, which is the $950,000 in settlement funds that has to be moved over to the Affordable Housing Trust per the settlement agreement. But that is also captured in our free cash number because it comes in the general fund, has to close out to free cash. Also included in the numbers are any of the opioid money that we get. So that has to close out to free cash. That's why we have articles that move that money into a specific article so that we can spend that money per the settlement agreements for the opioid funds. And then this is just showing our estimate related to excess levy capacity and the growth of that for the last 10 years. You can see in FY24, we're actually expected to reduce our excess levy capacity by about $250,000. So before I move on to FY25, I just want to answer any questions related to the closeout of 23 and our updated estimates for 24. I don't know why that. My screen just went black, so. My computer just turned off.
That's it, we're done.
I guess so.
How's everyone happy? There we go. Nice job, Christy. That was very succinct. We have nice fiscal numbers. Let's all go.
It's because my charger isn't.
Here, you can have mine.
Out of power. It's not working.
Here, try over here.
There, wait, you're back. There we go.
Oh, now it's lit up. So.
Now you're back.
Nice. Okay. All right. So included in our FY25 budget pressures is electricity for the podium. I guess so. Okay. So I'm going to talk about budget pressures that we're seeing on the town side. Superintendent Bach will get up and talk about budget pressures they're seeing on the school side. And then Maureen Amiot, our library director, is also going to speak about what she's anticipating for the library project. Then I'll come back up and talk about the FY25 budget process, give an update on ARPA funds, and then we'll have an opportunity to answer some questions about the October town meeting warrant. So on the town side, this is similar to what we see year over year. So any budget pressures would be any contractual obligations for cost of living and step increases related to our union contracts. Health insurance increases are things that we follow very carefully, and we're experience rated, so we continue to follow that. And then just the rising cost of goods and services, as we mentioned last year. And also true this year, as everything is going up in our private lives, we're also seeing that affect the town as well. One bullet that I just wanted to point out was that last year we did sign an electricity contract for municipal buildings. It's a 30-month contract. It began in July, and it was for 12.5 cents per kilowatt hour. That was an increase certainly from our last contract, but very typical of what you're seeing in the electricity market. Though I'm pointing it out as a budget pressure, we did budget for that increase in fiscal 24, so you won't see a steep increase in fiscal 25. The town union contracts, as I mentioned, we've settled 5 of our 6 union contracts, so those were all settled through June 30th. They were already funded. We do have one contract that expired June 30th of 2023, and that's the firefighters, and that's not settled at this point. Insurance, just wanting to point out that we're always trying to get creative around insurance. We do that as staff, but we also work really closely with our insurance advisory committee. We have a great committee made up of representatives from all the unions who have a really good understanding of the pressures that we face and that they also face with the increase in insurance rates. And so these is just examples of things that we've done as a collaborative team over the years to try to combat rates. And so for the last year, we did have an increase, but in prior years we've had 0. So we have done very well, but certainly something that is always a pressure for us as we go into a budget season. Looking at our OPEB trust fund, you can see here that our unfunded liability as for fiscal 22 was 107 million. Sorry, not billion. So this is just showing our trust fund and how it's growing. Not quite at the 107 million, but we all did work together on the OPEB. Part of our comprehensive fiscal management policy, so our funding strategy. As a reminder, our funding strategy was that we would start to fund, let me back up. We stopped funding OPEB during COVID. That was one of the things that we did to try to save money, not knowing what was coming next. And so we've been working back up to that 1.1 million that was previously funded through the budget. So in fiscal 22, we funded exclusively through available funds at 600,000. Last in fiscal 23, again, just through available funds at 200,000. And then we have this plan to incrementally move the incrementally increase the insurance budget to get back up to that 1.1 million while at the same time using available funds. So for fiscal 25, we would increase the budget by $200,000, so to going up to that 400,000, and then also appropriate 200,000 from free cash to get to the 6. Also, as part of that, change to the comprehensive fiscal management policies, we started to charge back the enterprise accounts for folks taking insurance and working under those. So Public Works, Water and Sewer, and then the Country Club. Additionally, beginning in fiscal 23, we started increasing our annual funding appropriation by $5,000 for each benefited position added to the town or school payroll. And so you can see that as a separate line item in our budget. So for each new position, and that's really important, it's not a new employee. It's just if we add a position, we add $5,000 to the budget in a separate line. When we look at some of the planning documents and assessments and initiatives, these are really community engagement plans that have come through a process where we work with the community to really identify different initiatives that we want to move forward. And so we look at them as guiding documents as we put our budget priorities together. In 2018, we did the strategic plan. It had 21 initiatives. Just pointing out that one of the initiatives was the multi-generational center. As you all know, that's proposed for acquisition and funding at the fall town meeting. If that is to move forward, we do have associated costs with that building, and I'll get more into that in the future slides. We also have the senior needs assessment, which we completed this year in fiscal 23. We have a group working with the assistant town manager on a 5-year implementation plan. That will be presented to the select board at the first meeting in October. And so any implementation expected for FY25 could potentially be a budget pressure. In 2021, we did the local rapid recovery plan that's associated with economic development. Out of that came 10 initiatives. Some of them have been funded through ARPA, others have been funded through the state. As you all know, we had a vacancy for a few months in the economic development director position. So some of the grants that we received are just now being implemented, so we don't expect anything to come in fiscal 25 because we're working through things that we already have funding for. The BWALT feasibility study, which was completed in 2021, that project is separated out into 6 segments, and the implementation plan identifies a phased approach as being how we would build it. Part of that phasing is for us to pursue grant opportunities. Another part of that phasing is for the planning board to identify when projects come before them if they're able to work with property owners to build even small sections. But phase 1, which is the Otis Street corridor, is incorporated into the Otis Street corridor project for design and construction, and that is completely funded by, it's funded by grants. It's a multi-million-dollar project. The town has awarded $250,000 of ARPA funds to match that project. And then the state has given us, at this point, I think $4.25 million. So as a group, we pursued funding for the beginning of phase 2. So we applied for and received a Mass Trails grant in the amount of $440,000. And then also you'll remember that at the annual town meeting, that says 2024, it should say 2023 because it already happened. At the annual meeting in March, the town appropriated matching grants of $110,000 for that project. And so that project is fully on the capital plan. So you can see the phasing of that project in looking at the capital plan documents. The climate action plan has 10 goals with multiple strategies. Last year, the town funded a sustainability coordinator. His name is Ben Bowers. He's been with us for a couple months now. And he's working with Sustainable Westborough to identify some priority projects, but has already identified some grants that could fund any of the projects that they're discussing. So inclusive of that is assessment of locations of electric vehicle charging stations as an example. In 2021, we completed the master plan. As part of that, we have an implementation committee, which will be reporting on progress to date at the October town meeting. They've met with all of our departments and some committees to learn about work that's already underway related to master plan priorities. In June, we also applied for a downtown development grant. So that grant would create sort of a mini master plan for the downtown. So as you know, the master plan focuses a lot on the economic development, walkability, bikeability, and connectivity in the downtown. And so this would be a grant to have a plan very focused on the downtown. That award we'll learn about in November, and the matching funds that have been awarded through ARPA of $10,000. And then also the senior needs assessment, as I mentioned before. The implementation plan will come out next month. However, it will likely be focused on, if the community center were to pass, there were several concerns raised about the current building at the senior center and their ability to program. And a lot of that will be addressed if the community center is to move forward. And so we will likely focus on those concerns. Looking at staffing, we have several studies also related to staffing. So budget pressures for fiscal 25, there was one additional firefighter position which was funded using ARPA funds. That cost will be included in the FY25 budget. And then 2 additional firefighter positions are proposed for the fall town meeting. If those are approved, the cost of these positions for the full fiscal year will be included in the FY25 budget. In the police department, 3 additional officers were funded using ARPA funds. The last year of that offset is fiscal 25. So we'll see an increase in that budget. And then related to the staffing study, there is a recommendation for an additional planning position. At the time of the staffing study, the suggestion was to move the part-time ZBA secretary position to a full-time planner. That's not the recommendation that's going to be before you, and I'll show you that here. In working with these are anticipated FY25 personnel requests. In working with the new director of planning, we've identified the need for a transportation planner. That position would lift some of the responsibilities out of engineering as well as planning, and really have someone dedicated to not just traffic, but also walkability, bikeability, so other initiatives. So the BWALT project, as an example, traffic and transportation related to anything in front of the planning board, working with the MBTA, the WRTA, the things that our town planner already does, but this would really be a focused position on transportation. And again, we haven't developed the salary, so these are estimated salary amounts because our salaries, of course, are based on certain criteria after we've created a job description. These are just things that I'm letting you know are coming, and these are just estimates. In the finance department, we have a recommendation to take the town accountant position out of the finance director position. As you know, this is a significant amount of work for our current finance director. This would free up the finance director to really be able to focus more on strategic planning, financial planning, and working with the rest of the financial team, and pulling out the town accountant responsibilities is something that we're recommending. In information technology, we have a GIS administrator. She works for us 19 hours a week. That's not benefited. However, with the creation of the stormwater utility, we're asking for some additional hours for that position. Some of that would be paid for through the stormwater utility. Some of it would come out of the general fund. And then one of the things that we talked about with the board is the non-union staff salary adjustments, or a review of non-union staff salaries. So the last time that the town participated in a class and comp study was in 2018. The market has changed significantly for lots of positions, but definitely we're noticing it in the municipal positions. You can see there's lots of positions vacant. If you go on the MMA website, you'll see that a lot of towns are struggling to fill positions, and so we want to make sure that we're competitive in the market. Also, our union positions are reviewed as part of our contract negotiations every time the contract comes up, but non-union staff, again, hasn't had that review since 2018. These are anticipated personnel requests if the community center purchase is approved, and we're working on an additional presentation specifically related to the community center, but just in terms of personnel, we would be looking for a community center manager through the recreation department. A lot of the staff that the recreation department employs related to programming and anticipated need for sort of attendance at the community center. All of that is projected to be funded through the revolving account. But this community center manager would be funded, is proposed to be funded through the budget, so a general fund. In the senior center, if this were to move forward, we would request an increase in the program and volunteer coordinator hours. So currently that person works 25 hours a week, so is already benefited. We would want to increase that to the full 40 hours a week so that they're able to spend the time programming the larger building. And then we would be looking for an additional custodian in the Department of Public Works. All right, capital planning.
Sorry, Chrissy, do you want to stop if anybody had any questions on anything they've seen so far? Part of the reason we're here, I think, is so that we can all hear this, but also so we can all hear everybody's questions and concerns regarding any of these items. So if anybody has any comments, please feel free to interject. Seeing none.
Go on. Related to our capital planning process, you're all very familiar with it. So we do a 5-year capital plan. And that's something that we've done for a long time, and all the departments participate. In the last couple of years, we've added this long-range capital needs, where the next 6, so it looks out 6 to 15 years. A couple years ago, we added that, and we added just a listing. Now last year, we added some narrative around it. The purpose of sort of trying to collect this information is to really be able to schedule out some of the larger capital projects and also think about how we can create funding mechanisms that aren't necessarily a borrow. And so we have presented that. We did present a draft of that to the select board in July, I think. And so we certainly want to complete that as we begin fiscal 25. Some of the larger capital projects, usually I don't present on capital projects because we haven't heard from all the departments on what their needs are. I don't present on them at this meeting, but obviously there are 2 major items that I just wanted to touch on. So one is the community center. I should say that in addition to the staffing that I mentioned, we would also expect an increase in utility budgets, so electricity obviously related to that building. And we do have some preliminary estimates, so trying to finalize those to share with all of you. If the community center were to pass at the October town meeting, we would pay for that purchase with the borrow, so the $8.8 million would be a borrow. Here, you'll note that our anticipated funding source for fit-up and construction costs would be available funds. So that includes sale of real estate. We have $1.8 million in sale of real estate. If we were to sell the senior center, money would go into that as well. I do want to caveat all of that with if we want to do anything that's requires a major structural change, that could change. So if we're talking, significantly more than just putting in a commercial kitchen, which is something that we've talked about that we would need for a senior center, and sort of creating some basic rooms if we're adding, I don't know, a 3rd floor or a mezzanine or, any of those things, more elevators, all of those things will play into, what the funding source would be. However, we do anticipate using available funds for the fit up of the building. That would come to the town meeting in the fall of 2024. You'll also see on your warrant, so I'm jumping ahead, is that we've actually broken out the community center article into 2 articles, just really for ease of understanding. The first is the article that allows the select board to acquire the property and allows them to borrow for the $8.8 million. The second is a free cash article, which right now just says a sum of money, but it would be for due diligence on the property and also the cost of the public engagement and design. So that all of those things I just mentioned were already in that one article. We've broken them out into 2. The golf club building, so the golf club building use committee will be making their recommendations to the select board on the 26th. It's anticipated that this building, based on the recommendations, will be largely to support the golf course and also include a restaurant, which would pay a lease payment to the town. So just wanting to point out that debt payments on whatever we do with that building could be made using both the Golf Club Enterprise Fund and then also restaurant lease payments. So just wanting to point out alternative funding sources for some of these large projects that you're hearing about. Now I'm going to turn it over to Amber. You're up.
Oh, okay.
Any questions on the capital projects?
Okay.
This isn't your last chance. So.
I mean, I have a comment, and that is, for all of us, with these plans, how are we going to pay for them? So are we going to have that discussion at the end of this, in terms of what the projections are, in terms of revenue to pay for all the things we're talking about tonight? See everybody shaking their head, I hope so.
All right. Let's see if this works for me. Come on. Okay. Welcome to FY25 budget season. I really enjoy this as a warm-up. It's kind of nice to get a little bit of a slow start to be able to come together and see everybody since we were last all together. Christie's presentation called out some of the major areas that I will do as well. And I'll step you through it, and then we'll, I guess, move back into other general questions for everyone. So I'll do a brief overview of potential impacts. As always, as Christy noted, we have such a short window to figure out funding impacts of where we currently are. We're 16 days in on FY24. So, you know, I think we're always responding to the development of the year and what will happen before we end up at March town meeting. However, as you know, we've always made sure that we budget using the current enrollment numbers we have. We don't make projections. We maintain that stability. And I believe we have a really strong, proven process and history of collaboration, which we've ironed out with your help over the years. I like the follow-up meetings, the extended discussions, and the opportunities for us to present our budget in phases. So, you know, I think the breakout at the town is always very clean because you have fire, police. It's nice to be able to see the development of our budget in chunks, and we bring those to you through multiple presentations, and then we meet with FinCom in between. So, you know, I think it's a process that works, but it's also available to be modified. And we just, as coming into the season, you know, Walter, if you feel like there's pieces we need to change as you're working with the committee, we're always open to that. So the budget drivers for us are well known to everybody. It's always going to be enrollment, enrollment projections for growth, contracts and fixed costs when you're looking at the electricity and fuel that we talked about just a little bit through the lens of the increases we saw last year with the 30% for electricity, which was a big hit for all of us. And then, of course, special education, which has some always unanticipated impacts. So let's look at a couple of those. Enrollment and maintaining program service are always our core goals. I think looking at where we are with enrollment trends, we're always studying them. We continue to see that, interestingly, I think it's reassuring, the enrollment trends that we have continued to follow the original projections of that 10-year report, which we did when I arrived. It was, I mean, I'm entering my 10th year, so it was my first year that we did the enrollment study and report. They had predicted that we would grow out to about 4,200 at that time. And the slow growth to hitting that 4,200 appears to be happening now. You know, currently we're sitting at, I think, just around 3,996. Like we're, and then we'll go up during the year, and then there's always transitions. But we do see a slow growth happening as some new housing and different opportunities are coming into play. But it's good to see that those projections have held fairly stable. I do think we're watching the short and long-term impact on some of the homelessness issues, which we've talked about as a community. We've always had a range of displaced families, and we've always managed having a range of complex needs. The influx of the change with the housing of the hotels, I'm carrying right now I'm calling it a short-term impact over the next 2 years. I anticipate, fingers crossed for all of us, both as a nation and a state, that we start to see some kind of stabilization and more permanent housing, and that this influx of homelessness will begin to dissipate into some more stable housing. I do think that we'll be looking at the long-term impact of the state shelter and how big they actually grow that shelter, how many of those families then are, obviously when you're in a shelter setting such as they're setting up there, you're going to have a longer extended period of stay, and I imagine we'll see a general overall impact. But it's like they added an apartment complex when you do that, and it's going to be a 20-unit to 30-unit apartment complex in terms of family impact for us. Not all of those would necessarily come to us. They would rotate to other home districts if they came from that home district, but we're doing that work on the ground to track that as part of our overall kind of potential enrollment impact. Currently, our classroom projections are within the school committee guidelines, even with the families we've taken in this summer. And I anticipate that our goal is always, of course, to keep class sizes as low as possible, which lets us meet the diverse needs of the types of students that we have in our classrooms. For us, it's contract and fixed services. Currently, you heard us also talk about the stability of contract implementation. We're currently in year 2 of every contract. We have settled contracts across all of our units. So this is year 1. We've opened up our contracts. The budget for '24 carried implementation of year 1. We're moving to year 2, and that's teachers, administrators. There's a small administrators units of vice principals and curriculum coordinators, and a small unit of administrators. It doesn't refer to, say, me in central office and those are unaligned. We have some maintenance and other assistants up at Forbes, other positions. Those are all unaligned positions across district. Custodian, food service, they're all settled. You get a sampling here, and again, people move through these steps and COLAs at different rates. Not all teachers are going to move on a step. They're at the top, they're only going to get the COLA. So when we're doing all the salary calculations, we have fixed numbers at this point, and we're heading into year 2, so it gives us kind of a hard rollover. But we all know that when you're carrying 83% of your budget in staffing, you're looking at the big piece that we work on calculating first, and that's always our big impact. We certainly know that transportation can be a big hit. When we brought on the transportation contract several years ago, it went up by over $1 million. Right now we have this year, and then we will go out to bid next year for a FY26 new contract with a busing company. Currently for FY25, I anticipate, this isn't decided yet finally, but right now, as we're doing some rough numbers and starting to look at trends, carrying 5% increase for busing based on the CPI over the last 2 years. That's Anita's first kind of guess at where she would probably ask me to bring it in, and she's going to look at any other pieces that might change that percentage. I mean, how much more variability could we have in busing? It's crazy right now. Utilities, I think we hit on that in the other discussion when Christy was highlighting the hit for electricity and fuel and trash were all large last year. The trash for us was based upon changes in the way that we were managing some of those costs, and I'll mention that briefly. You can see the differential in some of those numbers, though, what we budgeted and what we expended. And when we look at those gaps, you're looking at about 300,000 in gaps that we then had to make cuts across other expenditures, planned repair projects, pushing under revolving accounts. Those are always where we pick up covering any over expenditures in certain line items. We have to leave the lights on. And even though we increased we increased FY24 by 29.5%, and we're still running high over at the end of last year. So that's getting a big look by Anita right now as we try to figure out how to manage the impact of that. And right now I'm calculating that we'll probably carry a 5% increase on electricity, but we're waiting to see. We would carry that on the lower number, not the higher number, but that's the discussion we're having. So that's all work that we're doing right now. Again, we don't push around a lot of numbers here because it's such early days. So, but I think it's, I'm trying to like show you where we are and starting to look at those assessments, and it's always going back into 23, look where we are at 24, and then project into 25. Trash removal had grown over several years, and we had pushed more money into that arena. We started doing the compost with Black Earth last year. We anticipate moving the majority of that cost onto the Chartwell revolving account for next year. So again, those are the kind of offsets in budget management that we'll use as we start to anticipate what we will do as we build FY25. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds of food was properly recycled into compost as opposed to going into landfills last year. I'm really looking forward to working with Ben as he moves into his work and our team to continue to leverage the sustainability goals that the town has been committed to. The other big driver that we call out is always special education. I'm just going to highlight 4 areas that we think about. One is just the unanticipated arrival of students that will arrive with needs, which will come in the form of IEPs, where they might walk on site and we will welcome to the community, bring them into a school setting, and we will implement their IEP that they arrive with. That doesn't mean we aren't negotiating services always, but we're always both happy to have every family and worried about unanticipated impact that can arrive in the district, and that can be large or small. But we track that, and we, remember last year in current FY24, we budgeted $400,000 for tuitions that we knew would come in across the span of the year potentially. So, that was part of our budget package. We'll be tracking that and see how we do. Our out-of-district tuitions are always where you can take a very big hit if you aren't able to track, and even if you are tracking those numbers. But that we use circuit breaker, which we get from the state, which is to cover beyond your base costs, things beyond, and then we use a combination of budget and circuit breaker to cover out-of-district tuitions. As I said, we budgeted $400,000 in budget, and then we used last year's circuit breaker number, which was $1,860,000 and extra. It's gone up about $336,000, so we did get a modest increase in terms of, I say modest because that's both a big and small number. That could be one kid. So you just don't know whether or not that's a huge benefit to our tuition offset, or whether or not we would still have a gap. And so the gap is always going to be around what we carried this year in 24, what tuitions are costing us, and the gap between what we get in circuit breaker and what we would need to provide in tuition budget money. Transportation has continued to be an increased cost, and again, we're having to find all sorts of different vendors to transport students, mostly the van-based transports for complex needs students and trips and things like that. We do get reimbursement beyond, it's a shared cost, and they've increased what we are getting at the state level. You've seen that coming through in the funding cycles as they've tried to manage the impacts of transportation on both the homeless families and others. And we always have to kind of look at what that cost will be. I think it's always important to look at the fact that we continue to be immensely proud of the fact that our goal is to educate children in this community and to provide what they need to be successful. And I just, I think the poor special ed staff often feels like they're just the budget impact of what we bring forward at this meeting. So I added my little slide here that says, And they do really good work with amazing families in our community. And it's impressive that, our performance numbers remain very high across the state in comparison to our peers. We stay in the mix with all of them, but we test all of these complex kids. They're not programmed out. They're not in sustainably separate classrooms. They're in our classrooms. They're participants in all that testing, and we continue to do really well. And it's just a tribute to good instruction. I'm still negotiating this out, and we'll see where this falls, but last year we did increase, again, the goods and services costs, the vendor costs have gone through the roof across all sorts of costs, and last year we increased John's budget for technology, and he's, again, requesting 6 to 8% increase over that budget, given just what he's already seeing in the contracted services of all of our software contracts, our vendors, and our licenses, as well as hardware and just service for our work. We do as much of it in-house as we can, but that's a number that, right now we're at the phase where everybody's going to start giving us requests, and John's numbers always come in early because he tracks them really well. And so that's just a number that we're carrying right now and kind of thinking about. So those are the big drivers for us for the actual budget. And basically we're at a maintenance of service, and it's expensive to maintain service. We're basically rolling our contracts, rolling our buses, and keeping the lights on. We're not particularly anticipating, although I haven't received any requests yet for any staffing requests. All of that stuff will be coming in from staff in the next several weeks as we build our first tier budget. Right now, I'm not anticipating, I'm not projecting staffing additions. And so right now we'll wait and see what comes in. But maintenance of service right now is just the cost of rolling those contracts and maintaining all of our service vendors. So echoes of what you've already, heard from Christy. I'm going to speak quickly about our capital projects, and I'm going to turn it back then to Christy, who's going to have Maureen speak, I think, about the library. So we had a warrant article on the fall town meeting, which I'm going to speak about in just a minute, to air condition the high schools at the gym. Our process is to continually collaborate with the capital process at the town, working with Kim and her team and our representatives to basically review and assess our projects and continue to cycle them and adjust them against the other demands in the town. We try to keep those long-range goals, working to successfully rotate out projects to spread them out, push them out as far as possible and as cost effectively as possible, while we also maintain well-cared-for buildings. I mean, we're all staggered by the numbers. We've talked about this a lot. There's no such thing as a small roof repair anymore, or any of these projects. And on that note, I'll talk about the high school air conditioning. So originally, for a short discussion, we don't want you to glaze over, we had broken apart the ARPA funds we had received to replace the chillers at the high school, which is the chilling system, which is different than air conditioning, the massive chiller systems that cool the air, that run everything at the high school besides the 2 gyms, right? We wanted to basically repair and replace those and expand their capacity to pick up the air conditioning. We did all of that. It came back. The numbers didn't match what we had been given for ARPA funding. So we went back and broke it apart, pulled the chillers separately, put that bid out. It comes in. It falls within the guidelines of the funds we'd already received for ARPA, and we're currently developing that contract now, and that will move forward. We then peeled apart the separate topic of the high school gymnasiums, put that out to bid, got this nice astronomical number back, which was $2,248,000, $820. And after we kind of took a while to breathe through that, the school committee has been having really a whole series of robust conversations about it, and unanticipated the amount cost that we would see. They voted last night not to forward that article to fall town meeting and to cycle it back into the capital plan process. All right. The ones that you're going to see coming forward at March town meeting will be the Mill Pond roof restoration. We have the design dollars, which were awarded at the spring town meeting, and we're currently out on design. This is a restoration project that centers on the seal coating of this roof to give us an additional 20 years. That's one of the smart project choices. We get to push out that repair much further. We anticipate that's rough order of magnitude, so it's a placeholder now. The Hastings monster, which we've continued to track and work on over years, the request in working collaboratively, I just want to give a shout out to the hard work that the Capital Committee has done with us to continue to be problem solvers and partners. And I think few communities come at this kind of work with such high levels of partnering and collaboration. But we've worked together to make a plan. You asked us to basically go get the bid for the ADA. The timeline on that was, that we would then, we're bringing this number to March town meeting. We've made adjustments to the capital submissions that we'll send to Kim and the committee over the next couple of weeks here. And this is the number that will come forward with a cracked bid, because we have the design happening now. We'll put it out to bid. So again, that's a placeholder, and we will have a hard number with a cracked bid coming into March town meeting to complete the ADA piece of this project. That then unlocks everything that allows us to use dollars we already have for the HVAC repairs and other pieces. You also, in the capital process, planned that you would see the design dollars for the high school roof replacement and repair of the rim project. So right now, these are design estimates carrying 13% off of the rough order of magnitude, again, decided last year at the capital process. These are the three pieces. The rim design, which is that concrete edging that goes all the way around the high school, and then the one, C, will get a restorative design, and then the other would get a replacement. So those are the dollars for that. That's design, that will come in, and then that will move forward in the capital process again, where we can come with hard numbers to a town meeting that's scheduled against what capital committee wants us to do. So that's where we are, and I know that I think I could take questions now, but it might, what's your preference? And we could take some general questions, or you could let Maureen present, and then we could just kind of have a big old talk at the end. What's your preference?
Are there any questions immediately?
Big old talk. Let's do the big old talk. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Maureen.
Good evening, everyone. Maureen Amiot, 6 Arch Street, Library Director. I want to just give you a quick update on where things are at with our library repair project. So just to kind of give you a sense of where we're at in the timeline, town meeting approved funding in March for us to begin work on our study. And the study work kicked off this summer. We have been working on gathering some town input, and we will be at the spring town meeting with a request for the next phase of the project. So this just kind of gives you a high-level overview of where things are at. To remind you, this is planned to be a 3-phase project, which will involve doing all of the necessary repairs as one project rather than coming back again and again for piecemeal repairs. So as I said, phase 1 is currently underway. So far, we have a full 3D scan of the building and thorough documentation of all of the existing conditions. The architects and engineers have been on site to examine, measure, and assess conditions. The architects also had a very productive session with staff to discuss the way the space is currently used in the building and what we expect the needs to be going forward. They also had a great session with the public during our annual open house on September 8th to get feedback on some of the same questions and some slightly different ones than what they asked of staff. The public survey is currently open through the end of this month. The QR code is on the screen now, along with the URL if you can't snap it with your phone. And this will help us to determine what the priorities are for the community. The design team is working on multiple scope scenarios using all of this data. All of this information will be given to their cost estimators to do a very preliminary order of magnitude cost estimate on this project. We expect to have a preliminary schematic design and preliminary cost estimate after the first of the year, and we will share it with all of you and with the public as soon as we have it. We expect to be at the March annual town meeting to present that preliminary design and estimate and to request funding for the next phase of the project. Phase 2 will be the detailed design, cost estimating, and preparation of bid documents. If the second phase of the project is approved, the detailed design work will take about a year. We would then plan to be back at the March 2025 town meeting requesting funding to do the actual construction work. So I wanted to share a few of the preliminary findings from our design team and from the consultant reports. The first one, what I'm showing you here is the data and telecom cabling system is outdated, as we've discussed at length. It doesn't comply with modern standards for telecommunications infrastructure. One example that you see here is wires that are supported from electrical conduits and other pipes, which is a big code violation. Our fire alarm also has some issues. The quantity and location of audible visual signaling devices is inadequate and does not comply with NFPA standards. Overall, coverage of the automatic fire detection system is inadequate and it does not comply with current codes. Additionally, since the building is over 7,500 gross square feet in area, it's subject to state law, which requires the entire building to be provided with sprinkler protection if renovations are considered major or the building undergoes an addition. Major alterations are reasonably considered major in scope when work over a 5-year period affects 33% or more of the total gross square footage of the building, which this project will. If a sprinkler system is installed, it's likely that new water service will be required in order to support it. So a little bit of if you give a moose a muffin. Plumbing examination showed that there's an insufficient number of restrooms, and we've talked about that at length in the past as well. The current public restrooms are not fully ADA compliant, and staff restrooms are not ADA accessible at all. Paint and window frames are decaying, as we have also explained in the past. The historic building consultant is recommending that the windows in the 1908 building be repaired and refurbished. And parts of the slate and tile roofs have systemic failures. The beautiful skylight that brings natural light into the top floor is in very poor condition as well. Along with the chimneys both having major issues with cracking and efflorescence. The structural integrity of both chimneys has been compromised, and the historic consultant is recommending replacement of both chimneys. So again, the project, if approved at the next 2 annual town meetings would begin construction in 2025 and be complete in 2026. And as I said, the Library Building Committee will not be presenting a piecemeal project. The library would move out of the current building into a temporary site while construction takes place and will move back in when it's complete in order to get the work done in the fastest, most efficient way possible. We look forward to your support as we get this long-awaited project closer to completion. Thank you.
Questions, or is this where we go into the big old pile of questions?
So Rod Shafford, Finance Committee. So I appreciate the fact that we have a large amount of free cash, which is terrific. So I have a comment and then a question. We also see our taxes going up tremendously, and I'm wondering if we're positioning ourselves properly in terms of free cash and taxes. That's more of a comment. The question I have is, we don't talk at all about the revenue, and I wonder, the revenue part of the equation, what do we foresee in terms of incoming revenue that might offset some of these increased costs?
So related to your free cash comment, we do follow our fiscal management policies, which actually helps us to maintain our AAA bond rating. That being said, last year was the first time in my tenure with the town that we paid for a project that was over $1 million using free cash, because we do recognize that we do have a high free cash balance. And so as you start to look at some of these other capital items, such as the roof repairs that Amber's brought up, there's more consideration at this point due to our balance to use free cash for some of those larger projects. Regardless, it would only be used for one-time projects, so that we don't create a structural deficit, but it wouldn't add to the debt the town was taking on and also obviously paying for. Just trying to remember your second question about revenues.
I wonder if the free cash, is it generated from saving money on the budgets, or is it because we have more revenue than we anticipate, or is it a combination thereof?
It's a combination. It comes from multiple sources. So it comes from unexpended budgets. It comes from unanticipated influxes of cash. Specifically, as I mentioned, the settlement funds that we got. Last year, I think we got money from a outstanding tax case that was a large influx of cash that we didn't anticipate. Revenues obviously have been difficult to track as we've come out of COVID, but they're stabilizing, and so it's also unanticipated revenue. I'll let Leah jump in if you think I'm missing anything, but no, okay.
I just wonder if, when we get to the next step, if you could share the revenue projection based on...
We do not have revenue projections for fiscal 25.
No, when next step. Not
I thought you meant my next set of slides.
No.
It's like
Next slide.
we just started FY24. Okay. Okay, so looking at fiscal 25, this is the budget process. So obviously we've just kicked it off with our tri-board meeting, and this goes into late January when we have our other budget summit, and then of course all the follow-up meetings of all of your committees following that, preparing for a town meeting. Some additional financial initiatives that we anticipate that don't necessarily have a budget impact, but things that we think we should be considering. We've had several requests to review our dashboard communities. Amber and I have talked about it. They were established in 2018, so we're at our 5-year point, and we think it's a good time to review the listing of committees or communities that we compare to. We've also talked about the FY 2014 goal established by the Select Board to not increase more than 2% year over year, not including new growth. And so it's time to review that because we have not been meeting that goal. And also, obviously it's about 10 years old, that goal at this point. We want to complete the long-term plan, the long-term capital plan. So making sure that we're scheduling out these larger capital projects, understanding that we do have several large maintenance projects coming forward. And so wanting to make sure that we're anticipating those, creating funding sources for those and scheduling them. The stormwater utility, which was voted on at the last town meeting, is going into effect in FY25. So over the next few months, the Public Works Director will be working with the finance team and the select board to set rates for that utility. And then the Community Preservation Act, which went into effect in this fiscal year, is going to require the Community Preservation Committee to come together to develop an annual process, likely similar to the way that we have capital requests, so that they can consider use of those funds in the future. Moving on to American Rescue Plan funds, I know the Finance Committee had asked me to provide an update. I did last year at this meeting. So this is the process. The process is that different boards, different departments and boards and committees filled out application forms. They're submitted to my office, and then we discuss them with the finance team. The finance team evaluates proposals and makes recommendations to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee hears those recommendations and votes whether or not to recommend them to the Select Board, and then the Select Board considers awarding of those projects. So just going through the projects that have been awarded, in the Finance Department, we had the consulting contract for the reporting and eligibility of ARPA funds, and then also the assessor field inspections. In the Community Development Department, we had the matching funds for the Downtown Development Grant, which I mentioned earlier, that we won't know until November if we got the award. If we don't get the award, then that money will go back to the balance. And then the Otis Street Corridor project, which is at $250, that's under contract, so we know that that's going to be used. And then the Working Capital Grant Program, that's under the Economic Development Committee. Zach was working on that right before he left, so that's something that Mark will take up in the next few months. For Human Services and Recreation Departments, the Council on Aging was rewarded the $7,500 for the Daybreak program. So that program's working on being developed. In the library, there was, I think, there were desktop computer replacements, so multiple desktop computers. Those are on order. In the Recreation Department, there was matching funds for the dog park. So that grant has been awarded, and we're under contract for the design of that dog park, which we expect in December. Thank you. And then in Youth and Family Services, we have 2 outstanding awards that were being held due to vacancies in the department, though I did mention at the Select Board meeting and also the Finance Committee meeting that when we talk about the potential to move forward with a contract for clinical services for Youth and Family Services, we have the opportunity to use these funds for that. We've also talked about putting in an article on the October town meeting warrant, understanding that that's information is coming at you pretty quickly, and so considering this as an opportunity to be able to work through it a little bit more, but not have to wait until the March town meeting to fulfill that need that we know exists. For public safety and the fire department, we awarded $100,000 for new positions, so that's anticipated to fund 1+. And then also the technical rescue equipment, which was ordered. The fire and police department asked for public safety radio. That project is under contract. And then in the police department, as I mentioned, we had those 3 additional police officers that were hired. Public Works, very recently they were awarded money, the $50,000 for the lead service line investigation. They expect a contract on that in 2024 just due to their schedule of work. And then for the chlorine boosters, that project is out to bid, due back October 19th. So moving forward there. The school department, we completed the Armstrong roof project. I think that was the first ARPA project completed. And And then, as Amber mentioned, the replacement of the high school chillers, they're finalizing the contract on that. And then the Mill Pond security system is in progress. So this just shows the total in the different sort of areas of departments. So we have awarded almost 5.8 million. And then on the right, you can see that even though our grant award was actually less than that, that we have earned interest on those funds. And so our outstanding balance, our total funds with interest is 5.858 million. And right now available to expend is 69,572. So we'll be coming back with recommendations on how to spend those funds in the future. That's really all I had for a presentation, except for the October town meeting warrant article discussion. You should have on your desks in front of you the latest version, version 6 of the town meeting warrant. I just want to point out that the second article now is the budget adjustment article, and it actually it proposes to adjust all of the budgets in the one article. And then in addition to that, as I mentioned, the community center article was split into 2. There will be a version 7 because we're going to remove the high school article. And then obviously it's being reviewed by council, so there'll be some updates related to wording. So if anyone, go ahead.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't get a chance to ask the question at the end of the big question part sorry about that. So, I do want to start by a note by saying that I would love to start seeing from a revenue side, an understanding of the number of houses that are driving revenue. Not necessarily people, but just the properties, as well as the number of businesses, because I think we feel like the town is growing, but a growing town obviously needs some more expenses, and I think understanding where we're trending would be very helpful. So number of businesses.
I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yep.
I don't, what do you mean houses that are driving revenue?
Properties, anything that, like, we're getting property taxes for. So what are these revenue generating properties? Homes, last I checked, we're paying property taxes, so
Yeah.
I'm perplexed.
So you want a list of the top?
I'd love to have us start tracking the trending, number of homes, number of businesses, revenue from homes.
So an
revenue from
overall
businesses.
picture, not
Right. Just as
okay.
part of the regular discussion, because I'd love to see where we're going, and it gets to the revenue question, and it tells us where we're growing and where some of these, I think, facilities are needed. So that was just an observation. The question I had, though, was with regards to if we're looking in 2025, I think the Harvey contract is one that is going to have an impact on the town, whether it's the town expenses or the homeowners. How are we factoring in? What do we know about it? And do we have any sense of what's changing that may impact the town?
Good question. So the Harvey contract, I guess I should point out also in version 6 of the warrant is a decrease in the landfill budget. So that wasn't in there previously. So that kind of goes to your question. So I'll just explain that briefly. When we were going into the annual town meeting, we had been told to estimate, I think it was $85 per ton. So a significant increase in the per tonnage in the Harvey contract, which was an annual contract. When it was negotiated and finalized, it was actually less, which is what has resulted in that $50,000 decrease in the budget because it's not needed. At the time, we had been told that the town would need to anticipate how to move forward without access to the transfer station. And so we had a committee that was already created that started looking at the possibility of going to a full curbside program. I think in the spring, the committee came forward to the select board and recommended moving to a full curbside program. And the select board accepted those recommendations because at the time we were understanding that was Harvey's, that was our only option. That Harvey's wasn't going to let us use the transportation anymore. Following that, we met with Harvey's again, and through discussion, they advised that they would be willing to keep the transportation open with some improvements that they anticipate making. So, sort of back to the drawing board about what we as a town, want our program to be, understanding that we have goals within the town to increase recycling and do better management of our waste. So through discussions with Harvey's and also the Waste Management Exploratory Committee, we're still working on that. I think that one thing that we've learned through our discussions with Harvey's is that we would do a multi-year contract. It's been annual forever, which makes it difficult to sort of anticipate the next year. So that's something that we're going to be working on. We understand, we heard from the community that they were very disappointed when Harvey's told us they were closing. Now they're open, so that's, something that we're all factoring into that discussion. But I think one of the things that we're really, I can't answer your question in terms of cost because it hasn't been established yet. Harvey's did tell us that one of the things that was driving that number was that they anticipated some significant capital investment to be needed, and they've told us that it's actually less than they had anticipated. That's not a number, but that's good news. So, more to come, definitely more to come on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
So this is more of a general question than on the fall warrant, so it might be better now if that's okay. But I actually, Rod triggered this in my brain as well. We get a approximately monthly report from Leah that shows, all the accounts, what we spent this year, and it also shows all the past warrant articles. And probably the most interesting or surprising thing of that report is that you can go back about 10 years and there are still a lot of articles with money in them. And so we're a little curious as to, I don't know, maybe that becoming a little more transparent, and also the process beyond that eventually people spend the money or something. That seems like an area that could want to be looked at, because if we're getting out 8-9 years, maybe it's technically for the same purpose, but it seems like that it's an interesting phenomenon that we just noticed, and we're kind of interested. And it's not like an answer for tonight, but over the next year, we'd like to. That could be a theme of something we'd be interested in more information.
Sure. I think it's a good question. I do want to stress, though, that we do review that every year and talk to the departments that have gone to town meeting and asked for that money to see if there's still a need. Happy to make more of a presentation about that. I hear that point, but I just want to be clear that we do review it every year. We don't just, put it on the books and see what happens. So also, as you know, we have to go to town meeting to rescind debt authorization, and we've been trying to do that as well. But I understand your point.
So that raises sort of another question for me, because I think I'm the one that probably brought it up in our meetings. So for example, one of them is like a 2015, I assume high school ceiling tiles that still has $25,601 left. Does that mean that in reality we have an obligation, we've already agreed to fund ceiling tile replacement up to $25,000, so that free cash that we have could in theory be $25,000 less if the schools went out and replaced those ceiling tiles, because it's been approved? I mean, is that really what, these are open projects, essentially?
I think I'm missing your question. So I guess the answer is that they could still use the money. Are you asking if
Yes, they could go out tomorrow and replace ceiling tiles because it's been approved, right? And I'm not arguing that they should. I just want to clarify. So when we look at our available cash, right, that free cash number, it really is less any of these.
No, it's not.
It's actually the exact opposite. So if
'cause
they
these are-
didn't use, because I've pulled those articles out of fund balance, and so therefore, if every department said tomorrow, we don't want any of those funds, then free cash would increase by those numbers, not decrease.
They are already reserving these
So
funds.
they've been reserved in my fund balance.
But I mean, again, that would only be if those were raise and appropriate pieces. If they were borrows and it's available, we would rescind the borrow. It wouldn't be.
Right,
close
but
out the
none of
paper.
those articles that show on that report are borrowing articles. They are all available funds.
Available funds.
So they could have been raised and appropriated, and they could be free cash. There are several of them that I know appear to go back several years, but some of them, for instance, off the top of my head, there's our health reimbursement account that we put funds into every year, and I just add it to the organ object or the budget line. So it maybe was started in 2014, but every year or 2 years, we add money to it. And so instead of adding and creating an account every single time, I just put the funds in there. Another one, a great example is, I don't think Pat's here, but there's hazmat mitigation money for training, and that money was set aside a number of years ago for money that came in from CSX. And Pat uses those funds to do hazmat training, maybe once a year, for his staff. And so therefore, that money, he's using it as he goes, so that he doesn't hit his budget by that, because those monies were set up for that specific purpose. And so it was never designed to be a one and done.
So these don't necessarily represent a project, but rather sort of a budget item in those instances.
They
right?
represent an article at town meeting.
It's been my experience through my years, I guess, serving the town, is that warrant articles that are still open, frequently we've been asked to retire them and give the money back to the town. So to the extent that you find one or a few for which there is no need purpose, it behooves all of us to return the money to the town.
Which is why.
Lydia has frequently asked us to do that if it looks like it's a article that's completed and no longer for the money to be needed. So I think the examples of what you speak to is infrequent, because I know that we get pinged every time there's something that
Every
looks
year,
like
yep.
we could use it
Yeah.
for something else. So it's not
Pardon me,
normal
Leah?
that there would be a lot of money left that way.
You could stay for 1 second. I don't know if everybody in this room knows this, but every time I'm in the same room with Leah, I want to tell people that she is retiring at the end of October. Does everybody know? After serving this town for 31 years, and has just done a tremendous job for this town. And I see a couple surprise faces, so I'm glad that I'm telling a few folks this, but I want to take this opportunity and multiple opportunities in the future to say thank you, Leah, for all you've done for this town. I'm sorry, Steve, you were saying when I cut you off.
I think I've completed that particular
Okay.
story, but it behooves all of us who worry about the funds for the town to look at the mechanisms by which all this happens. And I think the questions that have been asked by the Finance Committee are to that point. It's best for all of us to understand these mechanisms so that, in fact, we can be as efficient as possible. And certainly, the purpose of this meeting is to give us all an opportunity when we sit in this hall to hear the stories from each department and the things that need to get done. Because as you've seen the list that's been put on the screen today, we have a need of a lot of things, and they're very, very expensive now. And so, the piecemeal approach in the past is not going to work. And I think the idea here is that we all work together to figure it out. As you've seen, the school committee is as worried about finances as anybody else. And if there's a better way to do it, we're going to try to find it. So, anyway. So, everybody needs to read the documents that create the town, the town charter, the town bylaws, and all the things that go with it, including finances, raising taxes, and all of that stuff. Because the sooner you get to all of that stuff, even though it may be fuzzy, you have a much better way to deal with the issues that each of us are facing here. Thank you.
To the question about housing in business quantities, the Affordable Housing Trust is tracking this. We've received preliminary numbers from the 2020 census, the most recent census of housing. The census for 2010 had 7,304 year-round housing units in Westborough. The 2020 census, the current estimate is 8,303. So in a decade, we added 999 housing units.
100 a year,
Pardon?
basically 100 a year on
Yeah.
average.
I would just add that our assessor is also tracking it, so we can definitely bring probably some more information related to it sounds like you were also asking about the business community as well and how they contribute. So we always show our values. We show that slide. I'll click back to it. But if you're looking for more detail, we can certainly provide that. Sorry to rush through these, but there, that one. But yes.
Show the detail behind that.
Yes, yeah, I understand.
I know you did.
Any other questions or comments? No. If there's any questions, we were going to talk about, the way that I had put the agenda together was to talk about the school committee article at the end, but we were able to talk about that already, so that's good. If there's an
Can we go back to or you don't have to pull up the slide, but the item on you had a number of new positions you're giving us a heads up on for 25. I guess I'm just trying to understand, particularly in anticipation of town meeting and the article on the community center, what is the timing for is the timing for the community center manager, coordinator, whatever the title was, is that really 25, or is that something a little longer range, being that the readiness of the full building won't be?
The community center manager would be anticipated for 25, yes. Understanding that we would close on if it were to pass, we would close on the property in early 2024. So we would want to be able to employ someone to help with that programming in the recreation department by July 1st of 2024, which is FY25.
So I think, I'm not sure if this is the right forum, but.
Sorry, Shelby, we are going to talk about this at the select board meeting. So, I mean, happy to answer your questions, but you'll get more detail as well at the select board meeting.
You mean on Tuesday?
Yes.
Yeah, no, and so, but since we're all here, I guess I think it's an important component based on just so everyone's aware, Christy has been gathering many of the questions that have come in from the community from a number of different sources, direct emails, phone calls, Facebook, what have you. And I do think that this is one of those questions we need to be prepared for on town meeting floor, because I know we've received some questions around staffing increases. I think this one might come as a little bit of a surprise. And so we should certainly be ready to understand why the management of that center couldn't be or isn't being planned to be absorbed by existing staff. So I'm not saying it should or shouldn't, but we have to be prepared to answer that certainly at the October town meeting. So I'm glad we'll get an update on Tuesday, and I know everyone will be watching.
I'd like to comment, I guess, about the school committee's interest in the article that we're not bringing forward at this time. As you know, we went out to bid, the engineering is done, and it's not wasted. What we want to do now is analyze that bid and figure out the pieces as to whether there's a way to do that work, because we really do believe that the gym should be air-conditioned, and figure out the most efficient way to get that done. We're still in the process of construction projects being super expensive, and it's not necessarily because of things that are obvious. The supply chain issues associated with delay of equipment is one of the things that's driving up the price of this kind of work, for which any bid in the Commonwealth is going to see the same problem. So perhaps some of those problems will go away with a later rebid, but in the meantime, we're going to parse it and figure out, what parts we might be able to modify or eliminate in order to get the price down. We still want to bring the article forward, and maybe we will be able to answer some of those questions between now and the next year annual town meeting. But we're not giving up on it. We just think it's too expensive for the period that we're in, and we think that the town's use of that money could better serve the town for other purposes right now. So that's our intent with it. It's going to come back, but we're going to bring it back when we, have a full understanding of what we get for what it's going to cost. So, thanks.
Oftentimes, when we pass over articles that are already on the warrant, or this one will be removed.
It'll be pulled.
It's gonna be removed. Okay, never mind.
We might pass over the first article. We don't have any prior year bills yet.
Anybody need bills the town owes them, bring them forward now.
So Christie, on the new positions that you presented, maybe you can go back to the budget timeline. When would all of us, well, at least Finance Committee and Select Board, anticipate starting to receive more information about those, the detail?
Not until the budget document is completed. So it would just be included in the budget. That's how we typically add new positions.
All right, thanks. You don't have to go to the slide then.
End of December.
What's that?
End of
Last
December.
week of December.
December 21st. Yeah.
Before Christmas.
It's like a Christmas party.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question for Amber. Amber, you had a slide that you presented that it was budget pressures in regards to the increase in pay in regards to COLA and contract agreements. The first line item, and I believe it was 3.8% and 3%. My question is, are those cumulative or are those inclusive? Is COLA part of the 3.8 or is it 6.8 total?
It's total.
increase? Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, the 3.8 is part of the step system, year-over-year benefit, if you will, for a teacher that moves up in the table, if you will. So
Plus
that's the
COLA.
3.8.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is what it takes to settle a contract.
The same in the other units, they just don't show it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all
I
of
know,
the
and
units.
I-
Anybody
each
has
one
a
was like
step
that.
system, there's money in the step, and then you get a COLA. I mean, the structure of it is, the same for fire, police, different, anybody who's designed a step system, it's the invisible percentage, and we at the negotiation table are often reminding people that it's real money, and so, you've got a package that you're negotiating when you're working with teams. So, yeah, that's the standard in any of them. And when you look at contracts, you can calculate it. The thing that we've done in the district is standardized the amount between the steps. I don't know if other units have done that, but when we started looking at contracts several years ago, a lot of the things that the school committee negotiation team has done, starting with Nicole Sullivan and Steve and Kristen continued, was leveling those steps so that we could have better management of cost.
More predictivity.
Yeah.
And just to support what Amber said, we have steps in all of our contracts as well. They're just not similar to you, I'm sure, that not everyone gets that step year over year. So it just depends on, for us, where they are and the number of years that they've been here and where they started.
Yeah, we have a 12-step table. There's people that have been here well beyond 12 years. They're tapped at the top, and so they're only going to they only get the COLA. They're not getting that 3.8. So when you're negotiating, as you know, the COLA will drive the discussion because you've got 35% of your staff sitting at the top. So, that's just part of the whole
Gotcha.
deal. Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
One of the issues with that was that, if you have sort of like a cycle of retirements where a lot of people retire. When I became a member of the school committee, we had steps that were variable. Some years where you had a lot of people, they might have got a 5% step increase. And that really would blow what would happen in that future year, where all of a sudden you get whacked with a couple of $100,000 worth of difference in steps, even though the same people are working there. So, I mean, one of the things we did was levelize that. So step to step to step is the same percentage. It was quite useful, I guess, in the sense that you can at least predict what your real costs are going to be year over year once you've settled the COLA. So
Yep.
that's what's behind it.
Christie, in the personnel requests, I didn't see it flagged in just your general budget comments of anticipated costs or changes as a result of potential changes in youth and family services. So
You're right.
are you
That's not in
anticipating
there.
budget neutrality year over year?
That's the expectation. So we're finalizing the scope of that. Based on what we've seen, we're expecting it to be budget neutral. So we just need to get that
Might
finalized.
shift around in terms of what it's...
It would definitely shift around from salary and wages to expenses.
I have a question, Amber. So you mentioned next year we're expecting maybe 5% increase in buses, which I'm sure is very up in there depending on fuel prices and that. But I'm curious if there's any reasonable expectation that something changes with our current contract, right? So as a parent whose child didn't get picked up for school already this year and multiple times last year, I'm curious, I mean, is there a possibility that we have a mid-year change in our bus contract or something that financially really changes that either this year or next year? Granted, I know that's hard to quantify, right? I mean, I don't think you could really estimate how that would impact, but I know that we're in a contract until 25, correct?
Yeah.
26? Is there a chance that we terminate that contract early, right? Which looks, no.
I don't anticipate we'll terminate that contract early. That would be a massive mess. But we are currently struggling with the fact that they haven't, that you have your busing and then you also have your vans. And the vans contracts are even more variable right now because they haven't been able to fulfill actually transporting the number of students that we need to. And so we had to go to a separate vendor, basically saying you're violating your contract by not giving us vendors. But those vendors are making a killing at like 3 times the cost of transportation. So there's variability in the transportation, not to the benefit, but to the deficit, but at least only for the van component. And we will play out this contract. The work is more around pressuring them to fulfill their contract guidelines, and then we don't pay anything that we don't see kids in seats transported. So Anita tracks the bills per month, and we don't pay anything until we see that we received the service. So we're always trying to claw back funding. In this case, it's then covering the offset of the van costs. So that's how we end up by the end of the year, hopefully closing out, in budget.
We are aware how expensive the bus contracts are, and we have been pursuing. All depends upon what state law allows us to do, but one of the things, by the way, that's on the recommendations of the Mass Association of School Committees is a request of the state to understand why, with all the different companies in the Commonwealth, we only get one bidder on bus contracts. It has been recently, yeah. There are words for what that might mean. And and in fact, they're asking the legislature to figure out what that word might be. Because there is something screwy going on with bus contracts in the Commonwealth. Other communities have figured out different ways to solve that. And, pending what might happen with federal money, electric buses may allow us to do some different things than we've been able to.
Everyone having fun? I'm getting the view. They're beginning to glaze over, Christie. So, again, it's the beginning of the process. I would just say from the school side component, it's just to get you thinking about the types of questions you have. You can email them to us. We'll have a series of, breakout meetings and discussions as we develop the budget. But, to warm up our list of questions. So thank you.
Yes, please reach out to Amber if you have any questions about any of this.
Call Leah. Keep her busy till the end.
Will we get a copy of the presentations that we,
It's we put it on the website.
on the town's website?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
we
I'll
always
send
do.
mine
Yep.
to you, Sheila. Yeah.
We always do.
Jen, is the rec department, the presentation you gave to the rec department, did you put that on the website, or could you?
It's It'll go to the website.
Okay.
Yeah. The link on the front page of the town website for the community center is pinned, and we'll add every presentation that we make to it.
And we will also push that communication to families so that we're getting the word out as widely as possible around your discussions. So when Jen has a presentation you want to push, Christy will give it to me and we'll send it to families as well.
And then, as Shelby mentioned, and actually Walter already sent me a bunch of questions from all of you, so thank you. We're creating that FAQ document as well, so.
I just wanted, kind of highlighting Shelby as the liaison to the rec commission. They had the meeting on Tuesday and kind of went through. So there's explanations in there that we'll hear on Tuesday about the staffing position and the changes. So anybody else that wants to come to the select board or watch it on TV, we'll see that as well. So
I'm sure I'll be back to the finance committee.
It's fine. I think we watch all the meetings at 1.5 speed. We established last time you
Yeah.
visited us.
That's right.
must mean I talk really fast.
What's really funny is watching people present to the school committee that are already talking really fast to get in their 3 minutes, and I'm at 1.5 speed watching people talk really fast to get in their 3 minutes. I had a minute of, wow, that guy's really fast. Wait a second.
Can I speak to that? The 3-minute story has been an opportunity for people who just arrive at a meeting, and it has been policy for maybe 30 years, both with the Board of Selectmen, with the school committee, and anybody else who has open meetings. There are opportunities for anybody who has something that they really want to spend more time on to make an appointment through the superintendent of schools to get on our agenda or your agenda or anybody else's agenda for the time that they feel is necessary. However, the thing I would say is that the discussion has to be pertinent to what we do as part of the school system under the laws of the Commonwealth in regards to what we're authorized to discuss. So anything that's off the wall that doesn't pertain, say, to the school committee really wouldn't be entertained in that circumstance. But within the 3 minutes, anybody can come forward, at least in our meeting, and discuss whatever they want, but only for 3 minutes.
One of the things I'll just mention, in November, the select board will have our tax classification hearing. And if you're not familiar with the tax classification process and how it works, I strongly recommend people who are looking for creative ways to, I'll say, minimize the burden on the taxpayers in different ways, creative ways. There's opportunities there. So familiarize yourself, and certainly if you have any questions, I can try to help or point you in the right direction of the information I've found.
Actually, so last year we did a whole series of education on that, and all of that is available on the assessor's page of the town website. Yes.
I just want to remind AFC members that we are still collecting questions on the community center, so some have sent me some, but if...
Yeah, you can send them to me as well. Pulling them all together, so.
I'd like to thank you all on behalf of our committee for great information tonight.
Great, thanks. Thank
Very
you.
helpful. Thank you. Thank you.
Good. And we finished early, I think, so.
Early's good.
If each committee wants to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second. All in favor? Adjourn. Thank you.